Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Grolier. Thank you all for being here. My name is Anna VQ Ross, and I'm very excited to be here to introduce three poets whose work I'm excited to hear together, especially today. I was sort of thinking of them as a group and thinking this was a really good sort of weaving of work that we're going to get to listen to tonight. So I think everybody has done this already, but please silence your cell phones if you haven't already. And any other warnings I need to give, James?
No, that's good.
That's good. Okay. And relax. Get ready to receive some really beautiful words. So we're just going to go in order of alphabetical by last name, and I'm going to I think I'll come up in between because it's irritating to read one long introduction for three people. So we're going to start with Nicole Callihan. Sure, yeah. Yay. In the beginning, there was a body, Nicole Callihan declares in her newest collection, this strange garment. But this is a body beloved, estranged, unraveling. Nipples fall off in the shower, radiologists instruct it, and everything is temporary. Yet somehow life continues in all of its bloody messes of dogs, daughters, and magnolias, all but missed. Lauren Camp, the New Mexico Poet Laureate, says of Nicole Callihan's poetry, hers is a mind of lyrical curiosity, turning life around and finding prisms. Let her show you how to place lady slipper orchids where your flesh used to be. Let these poems pull you into a life severed but raptured. In a recent review in Publishers Weekly, the reviewer said of this strange garment, called it bracing and intimate, and quoting Callihan's poem, The Pain Scale, but God, I'm ready for a pleasure scale and not moderate pleasure. I want severe but ruptured, declares this beautiful, memorable book makes room for the complete range. Nicole Callihan's poetry has appeared in the American Poetry Review, Painted Brides Quarterly, Tin House, Copper Nickel, Kenyon Review, and is a Poem a Day feature from the Academy of American Poets. Her books include SuperLoop, a collection of poems published in 2014. In 2015, she received, with Zoë Ryder White, the Baltic Writing Residency Chapbook Contest Award for their chapbook, A Study in Spring, Rabbit Catastrophe Press, 2015. That's such a cool name for a press. She is also the author of The Deeply Flawed Human, Downtown, Aging, and Translucence, a dual language cross-culture collaboration with Palestinian poet Samar Abdel-Jabbar. She taught in New York University's expository writing for 20 years and now hosts both informal and formal online poetry gatherings, which are excellent. She lives in New York City. Please welcome Nicole Callihan.
That was wonderful, Anna. Thank you. And this place is like a dream. I feel like I went to sleep and then I woke up and I was here. So thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm so excited to read with Tina and Matthew. My new book, This Strange Garment, because we are all wearing strange garments, documents my experience with breast cancer during the pandemic. Not recommended. But what are you gonna do? Live to tell the tale, right?
Hope so.
Yeah. The long ride home. Mother and I take a black car from uptown to Brooklyn. There are sirens and rain. At home, I will sketch pictures of birds onto a large silk sheet, though I do not know how to sketch and have forgotten the curvature of birds. This one has large wings. My friend sent pink cloth to make the body. On the bumps, I hold my breath. And the driver, looking in his rear view mirror, asks if I'm okay, says I'll be okay. There is an okayness in the world, yes, even though the color of fresh blood is startling. I say, even the weather is okay today, and the driver agrees. He is an ornithologist, he tells me. Mother stares out the window, a flock of dreams grazing in the cemetery. That must be interesting, I say. It is interesting, he says, if you like birds. I do not want to laugh because it hurts to laugh. And also, I don't know if the driver means to be funny. If you are tide curious, it is interesting to visit the Museum of the Moon. If Eros is obsolete, it is interesting to cover your body in flowers, to place lady slipper orchids where your flesh used to be, china berries up your nostrils, tree peonies in the soft open space of your legs. Already I'm intoxicated, ill, at ease. Wake up, Mom says. A hallucinatory citadel, a locked door. You're home. The as if of. I haven't yet mentioned that they moved my belly button. Actually, they didn't move it. They took it off and moved everything around it. And then they sewed it back into the exact spot I'd point to if someone were to ask where my belly button is. Like asking a toddler where her nose is, her mouth, her face, like stealing her nose, the rose of your thumb between your fingers, like asking the dog where her bone is. Though no one asks where my belly button is, I wonder why it wasn't tossed with the other scraps. In this way, just after the solstice, most everything began feeling arbitrary. The ice cubes flushed down the toilet, a spoon stuck under a pillow, Mama Heaton's gallbladder in a pink plastic bucket, that kid from 7th grade's spleen, the buttermilk poured on my stepmother's bread, the alphabet, the weather, the yellow stars scratched into your skin, that paper donkey with so many tails where a tail shouldn't be. I'm not sure what to say about the balloons tangled in the gumball tree, the fibrous forest, another vial of drawn blood. I doubt I could pick my body from a lineup. For weeks, I felt like I was dragging a sour dish towel beneath my brain. That one, I'd say to the lineup officer, the one with the lemons, the one that reeks of this morning's milk, last night's lamb juice, the raw food I sneak to the dog. In the beginning, there was a body. Also, the fear of never being desired again, of never desiring, of saying desire so many times it becomes dire. Then the incinerated parts, the parts that washed down the drain, the parts that were useless but still salvaged, the parts that no longer served any use. If you say belly button over and over, it'll start to sound like something else, like saying hydrangea until it becomes a bomb. To get to the other side. Do you ever feel like an alien? I asked Cliff. He's arranging my body on the radiation table. Usually I apologize for my muddy boots, But today I'm feeling more and more like my childhood alien abduction dreams were actually dreams about middle-aged cancer treatment. Like you've taken me from a field of poppies, I say, and are performing bizarre intergalactic experiments on me. Cliff laughs and secures my arm in a vise. He closes the 12-inch steel door behind him. Once I'm inside the radiation tube, I'm not supposed to think about Marie Curie's cataracts or her fingernails falling off, or the fact that her casket is made of lead. So instead, I repeat over and over, healing, radiant light. Healing, radiant light. And when I get bored of repeating healing, radiant light, I make up jokes instead. Horse walks into a bar with a camel hanging from his mouth. Bartender says, "Need a healing, radiant light?" Thank you, Anna. Cliff is on the other side of the glass. His voice booms through the speaker. "You ready?" he asks. I give a thumbs up. Why did the woman cross the road to get to the healing, radiant light? Cliff tells me to breathe in deeper, deeper. That's it, he says, and hold. At least I get to be the human, I'll tell him if he comes back. Healing, radiant light. Knock, knock. Healing, radiant light. Who's there? And release. I open my eyes to see the pine trees they've painted on the ceiling to trick my mind into thinking I'm lying in a field on the earth, staring up through the green and into the spacious blue sky. The eye of the machine scans me, beeps, holds, and again, Cliff says, "How many women does it take to screw in a healing, radiant light bulb?" One. This is called The Paper Anniversary. I wrote it on my 1-year anniversary of being diagnosed. The Paper Anniversary. Paper gowns are not as soft as cloth gowns, are not as soft as silk, as milk, which is only soft until it sours. Here in the wee hours, I sulk, the bulk of my body, my thin skin, the membrane of my weak brain. After the fanfare, the hoopla, the careful decisions, sloppy incisions, I write about the violets gone blue, the violence, that roses are red, that also pale yellow. Hello, it's been 1 year. What have I to fear? These queer balloons, pop, pop, pop. Paper gowns are not as soft as cloth gowns, are not as soft as dirt. This insidious hurt, and this and this and that and that and this. A rat on the grave of a spouse, a mouse, 2 mouses, so mice, so fuzzy dice. In a sky blue van, I should have been a man, and I was, and I wan and wane, am as sane as a sanitary napkin adhered to your big, fat, beautiful forehead. Bring me your dead, let them dance in my bed, let them swoon and spin and tap, tap, tap. Paper gowns are not as soft as cloth gowns, are not as soft as dust, the uncle who cussed and threw bottles, his face of models, this pace of piecing, of piecemeal, quiet thrill, grown shrill, grown silent as a mole on your spine. Oh, you're divine in your shame. this blame. Your name is mud in my eye, a chicken thigh I licked, gnawed to the bone, this moan, a wishbone caught in my pale, clean throat. Paper gowns are not as soft as cloth gowns, are not as soft as water, as the eyelashes of my daughter, who perhaps I've disappointed, certainly anointed, the oils and creams, the comb I've mouthed 1,000 times, the dreams. What a mystery, this sealed vessel, this meal for worms. Oh, how we squirm in the face of disaster, a vase full of asters. It's not love I'm after, but after the aftermath, in which X approaches infinity, the serenity. See also my affinity for pain. Paper gowns are not as soft as cloth gowns, are not as soft as the skin of the pear, pelt of the bear, the felt thing, the svelte and sung, wrung out to dry, draped over the faucet, just so you know, I've lost it all, or am losing, unloosing, a viper, candy striper, sunbeam and swish, the unwashed dish. The woman at the sink is sinking, is thinking. To abandon a body is a different sort of song. Welcome, fright, this flight, this sonorous water, amorous lover. What a lark, this dark, to couple and waft, drain these noodles. I wonder how many times I've said, brush your teeth, as if mattering begins in the head. We'll all be dead, we'll all be dead. Just brush your teeth and go to bed. And I'll read one last new poem. John Mulrooney, who I went to graduate school with in the century before this one, recently published this in the Arts Views, and I feel very grateful for that. So, to all the centuries, the last century, this century, and the next. Time. Of all the social constructs, I think I love time best. How this morning, which I could call morning, I did morning things, shuffled around in my morning gown, had not woken to a morning alarm because my body is like morning every day, come morning, so no need for an alarm. Light through a window will do, or not even light. The threat of light through a window will do. And my body being my second favorite construct, or having been my favorite construct when it was young and favorited, though now I think my favorite of all the constructs is language. I like how if you hold a page at a distance, it can say any old thing, but come close, and I might be offering an image, say, of my mother on the top of the stairs or at the bottom of the stairs, the top 40 years ago, the bottom only 3. So I guess I'm thinking about written language as a construct. Anna used to tie her books in yellow ribbon and carry them in a basket on her bicycle. I love remembering her in the village. I love how we suspected she and Michael were lovers. I less loved when her husband hung himself in the garage, how she changed her ribbon to a gray one. Didn't she? Do you love me? And if you don't, why have you read to the bottom of this page? It's evening now, or not evening, but the sky is so gray that the afternoon seems to be evening. Is loneliness a construct? Snow? The soup simmers. After I eat it, will my hunger be a construct? And if I don't, what then?
That was really lovely. I just want to say, I feel like I should clarify that I was not the Anna in that last poem. Although I would like to tie my books in ribbon, but okay. Anyway, moving on. Thank you, Nicole. So our next poet is Tina Kane. The poems in Tina Kane's latest book, Your Year of the Murder Hornet, limn the line between screen and self, world and home. You are now interacting as yourself, platforms tell me, as if my mind were a private kind of charm offensive against limitation. Poet Camille Guthrie says of Crane's work, in this fierce and enthralling book, Tina Kane records a time of pandemic and climate change, regimes and threats, murder hornets and dying seas, quarantine baking and leaf blower protests, stimulus payments and food chains, gentrification and apps, conspiracies and personal theories, doom scrolling and great conjunctions, fake narratives and disposable masks, and of sheltering in place when poetry is the only solace, the iambic in the darkness. Her poems create a moving map so that we don't struggle alone in our personal weather and remind us that we are also able to be overpowered by flowering magnolias. An interesting parallel, isn't it? Tina Kane is the author of the poetry collections Year of the Murder Hornets, Body of Work, and Once More with Feeling. She has also published the chapbooks Dear Elena, Letters for Elena Ferrante, and The Fifth Thought, as well as a young adult novel, Alma Press's Play. Kane serves as the Poet Laureate of Rhode Island, where she is the founder and director of Writer in the Schools Rhode Island. Her awards include a Fellowship Merit Award in Poetry from the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, and she was named a Poet Laureate Fellow with the Academy of American Poets in 2020. She is the creator-curator of the distance reading series, Poetry is Bread. Please welcome Tina Kane.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Nicole, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. I'm not sure how long I'm supposed to read, and whenever I practice at home, I read as fast as possible, so it always takes like 4 minutes. So I'm just going to, I think what I'll do is I'll read one poem from each of these books and a few from Murder Hornet and a few new ones. So great to be here. And it was great to hear and see Nicole read and have, especially during that last poem, class name right here, because I felt like the sound work you were doing, where you were like channeling Bath. So that was really great. This book is called Once More with Feeling, and it's kind of a New York book. It's got the 2nd Avenue Deli on the front. And my dad was a New York City cab driver for 40 years, so it's got a little yellow cab on the back. I'm just going to read one poem. It's the first poem in the book, and it's called Wish List. And I always say these are real wishes of mine. Wish list. To be the Mary J. Blige of poetry. To come back as Peter O'Toole. To have Peter Falk expose his tender heart to you, as John Cassavetes would make a monument to love of a fragile wife with a nervous tic and strangers from a bar on the couch. To be a poet of the sea, pounding down each syllable till it resembles almost nothing but sound between lovers. To be an unscripted scene of oneself, have a teardrop tattoo inked beneath one eye, to practice right action and right speech, to summon a stiff drink upon waking, at the foot of a dune, to be a grain of sand in that dune, to be seen up close at maximum magnification, intricate and entirely plausible. This book body of work, one of my favorite poems in the book is called Youngest Son. I have 3 kids. My oldest son, Cormac, is sitting in the back. But my youngest son is named Titian. And when he was little, when he was like 3 or 4 years old, he used to ask us, like, where was I before I was here? And then I would say, you were naked and flying around. And then he came down. So that's the reference in the poem. And then I borrow a phrase from a Danez Smith poem called Suddenly Summer. And the phrase is, go out for sweets and come back. And that is a reference to Trayvon Martin, who you remember was out for some Skittles when he was murdered by George Zimmerman. Youngest son. We used to laugh and say he was naked and flying around with the stars before he came down to be with us. These days, he says, when I was dead, because naked means sexy and he's not a baby. Knows what sex is, would rather be dead. But I don't want the word dead around my kids or around any mother's son. So I say, honey, you were never dead. And he says, then I fell like a raindrop into your mouth. And I say, yes. How the other morning I said yes when he called fog, a cloud on the ground. How he was formed, is forming from rain in my mouth, just as one day I believe he will go out for sweets and come back, just like that. For some boys like him, it may be that easy to not be a cloud called back to its rain place, for salt tears not to fill the space left in his wake. So this is my most recent book, Year of the Murder Hornet, and my most favorite thing about this book is the photograph on the cover, which is of 2 mannequins dressed up and wearing masks. And there's 102-year-old woman in our neighborhood for the last 30 years has been dressing up these 2 mannequins seasonally. And so when the pandemic hit, they wore masks for a couple of years. But my oldest son, Cormac, took the photo that we used for the cover, and it recently just won the Da Vinci Eye Book Design Award. So we will be getting a medal, an actual medal in the mail, which then he can go around wearing like Flavor Flav. So I'm going to read the title poem of the book is called Year of the Murder Hornet. And there's a reference in here to a poet sending me a book, and that's Mary Ruffel. Mary Ruffel and I are friends, and we have a written correspondence. And during the pandemic, especially, we were sending each other gifts, actual gifts all the time. And one of them was this book she sent me from the Salvation Army. Year of the Murder Hornet. Year of the cloud of pollen that chased me to my car across the supermarket parking lot. Year I was overpowered by flowering magnolia petals in a windstorm while walking home. Year of the murder hornet and coronavirus and weather as a system that shaped each day in a way that felt different from the past. Year during which you understood how the neighborhood you grew up in shaped the way you say friend. How the word childhood is the start of a sentence that has no end until you aren't the one saying it anymore. Year of grown-ups with their gravity, making everything a question or a fragment, depending on their personal weather, whether some of them are green or deep as trees of your imagining. Year when the way trees speak with each other, about each other, was more essential than the shade they gave. Year to try to live like trees, upright, yielding, seeking sunlight and silent languages. Year I got a book in the mail about house cleaning as a joke from another poet regarding a poem of mine about life being hard and people's constant quest on the internet to make things easier. Year the cover of the book read, introducing your household heroes, regular products with multiple abilities. How multiple abilities sounded more like an affliction than a capacity. Year of nights I lost sleep. Year my mind cradled me. I'm going to read this poem that I actually wrote for Nicole. And I had seen Nicole very soon after her diagnosis, writing these, she was like a font of creativity, writing these incredible poems and sharing them really contemporaneously on the internet. And she and I knew each other like in very much in passing, like 30 years ago. But then I saw her reading these poems, and I reached out, just said, hey, or I forget how it happened, but whatever. But this is the poem that I wrote after seeing her read one of these early poems, probably of which appeared in this book. And it's called Hold. Sometimes it's a shock event in lieu of a total coup, an instance more akin to the slow overthrow of familiar systems. How the course of a day lapses into years, then breaks. I used to say the day is long, seasons pass, back when Samantha would have her toddlers in pajamas by 4:30 in the afternoon. It's dark out, they don't know what time it is. She'd laugh and I'd laugh across the phone line, which could have been a sea for how vast the distance felt, treading February as we were newer versions of ourselves we ourselves hardly even knew. And now Nicole has cancer, yet appears more radiant than ever. As if lit from within by the threat of death, she projects such a fierce desire to live. I want to tell everyone about her. Poems which she reads on the internet from her bed, which stun me for the clarity I force upon myself by witnessing them in the dark as my family sleeps, phone aglow in my palm, shock of birds, shock of scans, shock of nodes, shock of breastless womankind. At the end, Nicole always places her hand flat on the screen, as if pressing it against mine, not to say stop or to dispute my meaning, but to hold me in the feeling of her thought. And then this poem I wrote for Matthew Lippman, right over there, and it's called Joy in Repetition. Joy in repetition. Joy in repetition, he wrote, because everything is Prince, and we wept separately via email because words were falling all over themselves and the worlds were falling down. We were getting older, but somehow younger too, when there was magic and sex and apple pie in the mouth. Every guitar solo was like water, and water was everywhere, the invention of water coming from where solid ground gives way. Cut the poetics bullshit, we agreed. Enough of Bloomingdale's. Meet me at the beautiful bodega. I'll be in blue, crushing it with my backpack of synaptic love and mystery. So this poem has a reference to Orlando, and as Nicole was asking me, it's one of the references. Orlando is my friend Orlando White, who's a poet, who the reference in here is the fact that he's of Diné Navajo origin. And then there's a double meaning. It's Orlando, the site of the Pulse Massacre down in Florida. Poem by a person called Woman. Ancient as math, bright as grass, I believe in rain as much as the next person called poet, as much as people called women in North Korea, trimming meadows with scissors, blade by blade. Not today, Satan, proclaimed the First Baptist Church on North Main. But it is Satan's day, and that's not me being pessimistic. That's the sexy handmade Halloween costume talking. Vichy France with tits, double agent of the patriarchy Kim Kardashian, and her husband with his MAGA hat on the verge of mental collapse or world domination. That's Orlando, not the tragedy of Pulse, but the native tragedy of my friend's history. And his early morning texts calling my coffee, which I have yet to drink, colonial and shit. A forced luxury like flour and bacon. I hear you, I say. I have to make my kids colonial pancakes today. We don't exist at all, he says. We will always die and die. Ain't I a woman, I want to know? Yeah, says Orlando. You're my homie. So in this book, there are a few essay poems. I was writing essays for the Providence Journal in my capacity as poet laureate. And then I was also reading a lot of essays by Lydia Davis. And so this one is called Essay on Beauty or Behold a True Story. And there's a phrase in it that's fuck the bread, which is a reference to an essay that appeared in the Paris Review very early on in the pandemic by Sabrina Oren-Mark, and it was called Fuck the Bread. Essay on Beauty or Behold a True Story. There once was a man who claimed he couldn't watch Bonnie and Clyde because Faye Dunaway was too beautiful. It's true, beauty hurts, but it's seldom debilitating. Overrated may be the way Meryl Streep is overrated in the eyes of a man who doesn't find her beautiful enough. Fuck the bread, a writer's mother once said when her daughter couldn't find a teaching job or yeast during a pandemic. The bread is over, she told her, dismissing life as we knew it. In one fell swoop, bread became language to my mind, no longer elastic in form, all leavening lost, as bread became love to my heart, a knot of needing and need. Another true story is that I am a mother and a writer who knows about beauty and bread, about language and interruption. I also know the mirror only tells part of the story of a face. The eyes have it, they say, but the eyes can only hold so much. The way a heart can be full and at the same time broken, different chambers of a single system split. The way Faye Dunaway kills beauty by being the mother of it. How we break bread to partake of it. And this last one is called Essay on Mercy. Essay on Mercy. So this book was written during the last half of the Trump administration and that first most intense portion of the pandemic. And when I wrote this, I was thinking about the fact that I'm from New York, and I remember seeing the numbers, and they were like, by this time next week, 10,000 people have died of COVID. And it was just such a horrifying thing to know in advance the projections. Essay on Mercy. It's all management before mercy for the suits at the rallies and for those alone in the ICU. Not a single mask to reuse, even for the mothers. Grieving in advance is intense, an anguish akin to combat, which it said feels like the second before a car wreck, only all the time. A single prescient moment right before impact that tenses the body for eternity, bruises the psyche and rewrites the system to run solely on adrenaline. But mourning is not war, and Antigone was not her brother. She sought to bury Polynices because ritual is everything. So a warrior she became. Still, mythology continues to bewilder us, as if life doesn't train us for death. It all remains grim if we don't see small mercies in our midst, the lessons we might miss, etc. Once, when I was young, kissing a boy I didn't love on a mattress in a floor through off 10th Avenue, I had the feeling I was falling through time. It was then, only then, that life wasn't about saving things, at least not mine. So I'm just going to read a couple of poems, a few poems from, I'm working on this new book called Search Engine. And this first poem is called Imaginary Dad. And it was published. So the backstory of this was like, I wrote it like, I don't know, 8 months ago. It got miraculously taken by Poetry Magazine. And then it got published in February. But in the time between October and February, I was actually in touch with the dad in this poem, who I hadn't been in touch with for 50 years, since I was 3 years old. And he was a Marine in Vietnam when I was born. Imaginary Dad was so imaginary, he ceased to exist. He wasn't sleeping in a treehouse or stalking the woods in fatigues, cheeks smeared green with camouflage grease, a knife between his teeth like I had envisioned him. He was just a married guy living in a small town near a dozen of my made-up cousins, kin so distant they didn't even know to miss me all their lives. I'd picture them fumbling in their pockets through loose change, patting their pants in search of something left behind, all the time never knowing what it was, or what it was like to eat Twizzlers while watching Apocalypse Now in a darkened theater on Bleecker Street, to think each time a soldier appeared on screen, now there's a dad if I ever saw one, because of course they'd seen one. He was nothing like that, and he belonged to me. So during the time before I was actually in touch with his dad, I was re-immersing myself in a lot of Vietnam literature, because I grew up in the village, and I have 3 dads. One of my second dad, the dad who raised me, one of his friends with Michael Hare, who wrote this seminal book on Vietnam called Dispatches, and he also wrote Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket. And so there's a lot of borrowed language from those texts in here. And this is called Triple Canopy of Memory. And triple canopy is the term that's used to describe the very dense foliage of the jungles of Vietnam. Triple canopy of memory. My newfound neuroplasticity has devised for me a father from velocity. The way my thoughts race to make something out of nothing, a dad of mine, being one of the last can't make it Caucasians to make it out of Brooklyn. A failure in some respects, but he'd be the first to admit it, so no hard feelings there. Down in the village, post-war permissiveness fed by the ethos of the era was neglect by another name. But again, no hard feelings, except for the feeling that, like the skinny street dogs of old San Juan, you could drop off from the pack as a kid, easily as you'd slipped in, and forever drift away. Seamlessly, like the perfume river that flowed through my mother to all of my fathers, a fragrance aggressive and beguiling as begonia's blooming blood. War-torn, petal soft as sin is how I fashioned my own pacification program. A cocktail of weed and poetry and camaraderie, the way trees in contact popped like fireworks before the bombs cooked off. The way raised by napalm and smoldering, my anger cooled. I knew the real heroes, as one Marine said, had already died. A final sortie from the big American machine of making my mother a widow, even as her husband lived. Mark your position if you believed what was happening to you. Turn your grief into action, the Viet Cong used to tell their troops. But what if grief is action? What if every one of us is just as candy-ass inside as the next guy, until the very end, a common thread, frayed and golden, afraid and beholden? War is hell, the grunts grunted, but contact is a mother. Holiest divisions melting in the jungle where the triple canopy of memory, most intimate, casts its shadow over us. Seated on the bathroom sink, I held my other father's shaving kit as he wiped fog from the mirror so I could see his bright white uniform reflecting back at me, crisp with purpose, the most distinct ghost I would ever glimpse in my whole entire life. The contours of war already written on him. In my dreams, we take the hill, then take the hill again, over and over until we couldn't take it any longer, until we'd had to take our rest. And I stopped writing placid letters penned in cursive, pink and purple hearts in the margins, and he stopped sending wallet-sized photos of his fluffy white dog wearing a stupid beret. So I'm just going to read two more. One I just wrote last week because my son was home in Cormac, and he said this: "Suffer the children. We don't even have the language to describe what is happening," my son is saying, on our way to the train station downtown. My hands are gripping the wheel as if increased pressure will force a path through the rush hour bottleneck, for his train departs in 6 minutes, and my mind keeps flickering between traffic jams, driveway killings, mass shootings, endless wars, and this morning's lingering affection for him as he stood before his reflection in the bathroom mirror, laughing about how his hairstyle recently reminds him of an ancient statue. Indeed, I could see the way his fawn-colored curls gather like a crown of laurel along his brow, or like ringlets carved in stone on some ancient Olympian. Only so much softer than this hard world he so often rails against. Guns everywhere and college a colossal ripoff. Overpriced yet priceless is my reply, even as I struggle to digest each day's onslaught, a steady diet of fresh slaughter and spilled petrol, even as I fail to distinguish felt reality from the kind that's lived, as if there were a distinction, thinking I have been through some things I want to tell my son to read. Thomas Mann, who believed if a work of the intellect is to have an immediate deep effect, there needs to be a secret kinship, convergence between the creator's personal destiny and the fate of his contemporaries. But that truth feels like a vagary as I press the pedal to propel our car past countless other cars in actual traffic, in actual rain. My son is right again. There is no language for what is happening, only things that break and relentless refrain. the story of a mother and her son. A young God said, suffer the children. Thus it was. All right, I'm going to skip this one, and I'm just going to read this last one on a lighter note. So this imaginary dad, who is not imaginary anymore, he was a Marine, and we talk on the phone now once a week, and he's really into George Patton, so I know a lot about George Patton these days. And so this poem is called Les Pensées sont des flowers, and that means thoughts are flowers, and it's actually a line from this French rapper named MC Solar. Les pensées sont des flowers. And this friend in the poem is my friend John Hennessy, who's a great poet, who's pretty local. Les pensées sont des flowers. The monk told my recently divorced friend that no woman would ever fuck him again if he kept carrying around that bag that looked like a purse. We laughed, wondered if merce was the proper term for this cross between a satchel and a pouch. We're both poets, me and my friend, so it's only natural that this end up in a poem, for the valiant way to complain is to create. Sometimes artists get to complain and call it art. Sometimes artists complain and no one listens. But my friend, living in a monastery in Germany with the monk for 2 weeks, could not speak about how incredulous he was about this declaration, because what did the monk know about sex? I'm thinking probably enough with respect to how it might pertain to a certain type of person. I'm also thinking how Nietzsche said, we have art so we don't die of reality, and how movie sets now have intimacy coaches to make sure everything goes okay. How in the silent era days, film sets were noisy as hell because who could even hear anyhow? Hell can also be the mind of a person like, say, George Patton, who liked to believe he had lived many lives, always as a warrior dying on a battlefield across the endless plains of time. What mind, you ask, desires valiant death over and over again? Maybe not the kind that sees the sky as a time machine or depicting clouds as a form of portraiture. Patton also proclaimed himself a poet, though he probably didn't have the particular form of fortitude it takes to carry a merce, even though everyone who got near him ended up fucked, and not in the good way. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. I was listening so hard, I kind of forgot to get up. So this brings us to our final poet, Matthew Lippman. This is the age of the bullet, Matthew Lippman writes in Mesmerizingly Sadly Beautiful. Days in which bullets sprout other bullets in the bullet garden. And a caricature of a onesie-wearing president sucking on a pacifier appears on the cover of a national magazine. I had that magazine cover on my kitchen table for a good 6 months. Lippman's poems are wildly inventive, yet grounded in the 21st century dailiness of parenting and dinner parties and Dunkin' Donuts, all of which serve as launch pads into perennial questions of mercy and trust. Dorianne Lux, who selected the book for the Levis Prize, describes Mesmerizingly Sadly Beautiful as humming with antic energy, takes on issues of sex, politics, race, religion, and poetry, all subjects our mothers warned us not to bring up at a dinner party. At times dreamily or nightmarishly surreal, at others so realistic we laugh or cringe in recognition. It's outrageously American, crass, funny, fast, talking, unbound, and yes, sadly beautiful. Matthew Lippman's collection, Mesmerizingly Sadly Beautiful, won the Four-Way Books Levis Prize in Poetry, selected by Dorianne Lux. He is also the author of 5 other poetry collections, A Little Gut Magic, American Chew, Salami Jew, I see a thread here, Monkey Bars, and The New Year of Yellow, winner of the Catherine A. Morton Prize from Terrapin Books. He's received the Jerome J. Shestak Prize from the American Poetry Review, a Mishner Fellowship in Poetry, and a New York State Foundation for the Arts grant. Please welcome Matthew.
It's the short thing. Thank you for thank you for coming out. The greatest artistic time in my life was in 1982. I was a guitar player in a rock and roll band. And I thought after that experience, I would go on and write songs, but I couldn't write songs for anything. So I started this poetry thing, and I've been trying to figure out how to get back to that moment artistically for a very long time. And recently what I've begun to do is I tried to form these sort of poetic rock bands with other poets, where I'd write a poem, they'd write a poem in response. It was a conversation, so like conversation and poetry, but I wasn't alone in this endeavor. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I referenced two of those poets in these poems. My poet friend Karen McCadden and my other poet friend Susan Brown. So that's that. And the other collaborative spirit in these poems is my daughter Eliana, who basically saved my life through music in the last year and a half, which is unfair because your kids aren't supposed to save your lives. You're supposed to save their lives, or, you know, take care of them. So all of these poems are essentially about her and music and the world. The first poem is called Skinny Dipping on Election Day. Man, I'm blind. I'm gonna do this. It's election day, I don't give a fuck. The blue, the red, the pink, the orange, it doesn't matter. Broccoli crowns are $20 a pop. The kangaroo costs $4 million, even if it won't hop for you and your family. The Republicans will win, the mud will invade our living rooms and lungs, and all the students will get A+, even if they don't know where to put the comma. Put the comma inside the quotation mark, I scream at them. Put the comma inside the fucking quotation marks. Imagine they're birds, little cardinals, will that help? The polls are open and there are masked men with rifles behind the bushes. Because this morning I put on the 1975 and broke down in my pants. Because this morning my daughter said, "Dad, listen to the blood red moon like we did when I was a kid, please." Because when you get pissed at your kin, you have to get unpissed quickly so the love can come back into the car like a quiet river you spent time inside of when you were younger, skinny dipping. Remember skinny dipping? That's when the world was quieter with apostrophes and commas. That's when the world was younger with blackboard and chalk, and the body was full with flab. I am not afraid to say it, Karen. I am crying. My children are getting older, and your children are getting older, and everyone is going to vote today in a world that no longer knows naked. My hope is that they are skinny dipping into their little voting booths when they pull the levers. It's election day, and I miss my children, Karen. I miss them so much, I put on the 1975 and sing along. The 1975 is a band. Here. Here's the t-shirt. I can't believe I just did that. This is called the vinyl muscle. Vinyl as in an LP record. Cormac, you know what records are. I knew you did. My daughter all day long gets up and out of bed and goes to the turntable on the dresser to flip the record. All day long flipping, waiting for Columbus for hours, Lowell George and Sam Clayton all day long. Telephone is ringing, Chairman Mao is on the line. Remember the 70s when Chairman Mao was always on the line? All we do for hours is flip the record. 4 songs, 16 minutes, side A, get up, turn it over, clean the groove, place the needle, side B. Listening to music was a workout. Get up, sit down, stir the soup, flip the record, chop wood, flip the record. That's what is wrong with the world these days. No one flips the record anymore. I read Martin Wiley's When Did We Stop Being So Cute? It was in '86 when the CD fell out of the sky into our living rooms and we stopped flipping the vinyl. That was it. Everyone just sitting around for hours, dying into their couches and sofas and lazy boys, because no one had to sweat to listen to Springsteen or Dvorak or LL Cool J anymore. No one had to flip the record. No one had to move a muscle to get into the groove. That's when we stopped being cute. I like being cute. A cute world the way it was cute before analog and everything felt softer. Nothing was softer, but maybe everything was less anxious, even Chairman Mao, because living required more fingertip and feel. Looking back on that world from this world, Queen was sexy cute, and the Beastie Boys were jovial cute. The smell of shrink wrap and the liner notes to Let's Get It On were cute. Now, everyone sits around and pushes buttons from their sedentary softness. And where is the muscle? The vinyl muscle. You need to go to the gym, I tell my daughter. Dad, she says, Lowell George didn't go to the gym. And she's right. She is up and back from her bed, side 3 onto side 4, Willin into Don't Bogart That Joint, Bill Payton and Richie Hayward and Kenny Gradney, while she gets her abs toned as fuck, like this whole flippin' thing might save the world if we were all still cute enough to get our turntables to spin in sync. This poem's called Sorry, Sweetie. Another poem about the 90s. I literally wrote a whole book called Sorry, Sweetie, Sorry, Sweetie, about Eliana and the band in 1975. I'm not afraid to say the 1975 saved my life. In so much as a band can save your life, they saved my life. That is to say, my daughter saved my life. She's 17 and said, listen to Bagsy, not in Ned, but first listen to Happiness. It's not fair to put that on your kid, that they saved your life. You're supposed to save their lives. At least you're supposed to take care of their lives and give them. And given that I dropped her from a car seat on her head when she was 7 months old, burned the kitchen down, trampled mud on her sweaters, yelled, go the fuck to sleep, I think she got the better end of the deal. Sorry, sweetie. That's messed up. But then Matty Healy and George, the drummer, and the rest of the lads came along to prop me up. I don't even know how they did it. That's the mystery of music. Like stars, or when you walk up a hill in November and everything's brown and dusty, but you know you are in the right place. Matty's third voice, the Elvis voice, coupled with his falsetto, and then the way he sings Fuck in a Car or I'm in love with you 1,000 times over, carried me out of some old barn in my mind that was burning down and kissed me on the mouth. Get up, love, he said. And here I am, the way music can save your life, save you from burning floorboards and bales of hay that have been jammed up in that metaphorical silo that stands between you and all of your shakes. So yeah, the 1975 did that for me, thanks to my kid. And music is everywhere. You just have to pay attention to find it. That's what Darryl DMC McDaniels did in his suicidal years. Listen to Sarah McLachlan over and over after he found out when he was a grown man that he had been adopted. Then they made a record together, he and Sarah, about being adopted to start breathing again. Then they started to breathe again. I want to make a poem with the 1975, but I don't want to sell it to anyone in hopes that it can save someone's life. Pull them out of the burning barn of their daytimes and nighttimes, kiss them on the mouth and say, get up, love. It's time to get a move on. And I will finish with a poem called A Sentimental Shot at Humanity. Karen, I don't know why I address you in the moment. Perhaps it's because you are in Vermont and I used to summer camp there when I was as whole of a lad as a lad could be, with all of those trees and silences creating prairies in my blood. It's March and my children are growing up. The Avett Brothers song Laundry Room is on the Spotify, and it occurs to me that all I have been doing for 18 years is laundry. The white load, the colored load, the load of bills and anxiety and iced tea and late nights with the kids when they couldn't fall asleep and were throwing up bile and aspartame and nightmares. But today, in March, I turned 58, and the children are slowly and quickly loading up the car and taking off. The Avett brothers have a song called I and Love and You. They sing, Brooklyn, Brooklyn, take me in. A long time ago, I thought Brooklyn was France, and then it took me in, and I made it my home. Rachel and I birthed our first child there, although I did no birthing of any kind. But I sure as shit held up the child to the Cobble Hill streetlights when she was born, said, look at us now, and here we are. The way time is a motherfucker, and I don't even miss myself from back then. The other night, Michael said, what's going on? I said, I am learning how to pay attention. He said, huh? Because it made sense to say. We can say 1,000 things to one another, Karen, and sometimes all someone needs to utter is, huh? And the cosmos just goes on tumbling out and keeps out tumbling. I miss you, Karen, and that's really why I address you in this poem, and everything makes me cry. Can we say that in a poem? What if Major Jackson read this poem? Or Jory Graham? Or Dead Gerald Stern? Would they think it was a sentimental shot at humanity? Who cares anymore? I am 58 and all I have is a good heart. The Avett brothers know, and right now I like that. I know if they read this poem, we drink whiskey and get out the mandolins to make some noise. That's why, Karen, I address you in this poem. We get out the mandolins to always make some noise. And my daughter, at this exact moment, is upstairs doing her own load of soiled sheets. It's hers, and I have no more quarters. The truth is, I could write this poem forever, just keep it going. That's my talent. But it's probably time to stop and whisper Brooklyn into the ears of my iced tea, an homage to some faraway place that let me do the family laundry in laundromats owned by people named Lucy and Franklin, people who used to bend down with me, get close to the hot dryer, and sing to the tumbling clothes, I and Love and You. Thank you very much.
Wow, I want to say thank you all for joining us this evening. Let's give the poets another round of applause for a beautiful reading tonight. We've got some books for sale. Poets will be signing books. Thanks again for coming. If everyone could please move your chairs up against the wall, I would be grateful. Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Wonderful reading tonight. That was fantastic. So good.
So much better than your. I think like my voice, yeah,